Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 229. The war of words between Prince Andrew, aka the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, and the Department of Justice is heating up. There's a source claiming that Prince Andrew has the emails to back up his assertion that he has not been ducking and dodging the Department of Justice. In fact, he says these emails will prove the exact opposite. Meanwhile, the rest of us are sitting around looking from Berman to Andrew, back to Berman to Andrew, like it was a game of ping pong with disgust on our faces. Enough posturing from both sides. If you have nothing to hide, Andrew, come forward and speak to the authorities on record. Not a written statement. There doesn't need to be any wrangling. There doesn't need to be any kind of maneuvering behind the scenes. If you have nothing to hide, just come forward, get it over with, and move on. Your actions are not the actions of somebody who has nothing to hide, though. The Prince of Punk Asses, aka the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, expects us to believe, just on his word, that these emails, they exist? We have no proof, just a source coming out and saying this, and who knows who that source even is? Probably one of his lickspittles or one of his legal team members, because I don't know how many people that Andrew could consider close to him at this point. He's been pretty much abandoned by everybody besides Mummy. And of course, that weird, disgusting lady that used to be his wife. That's for a whole different topic. You know what? In fact, that's for a whole different podcast. I'll leave that up to the Prince and the Pervert and the girls over there, Jen and Lisa, the ladies. I'll let them go ahead and talk a little bit more about Fergie, because they are way more in tune and locked in than I'll ever be when it comes to that sort of thing. But what I will tell you is this. We're dealing with two people, two groups here that I wouldn't trust if my life depended on it. And that's the Department of Justice, who has their own problems and their own warts. And of course, as Virginia Roberts would call him, speaking of warts, the Prince of Toads, aka the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family. Another person who has been nothing but deceitful this whole entire time. And again, you see my frustration with the SDNY? With their stupidity and the way they've conducted themselves throughout this case, they've left themselves open to criticism. They've left themselves open for these high-powered attorneys to attempt their legal wrangling and loophole jumping. That is why the case must be ironclad. You don't need to F around. No need to dick around here. You should have dropped in RICO indictments on everybody, Andrew included, if you had the goods, and been done with it. Instead, you come out in the media, you talk about how he's been uncooperative, you talk about this MLA now that we're hearing about, and through all of that public pressure, all of that attempts at public shaming, still no indictments. Not of Andrew or anybody else. And from where Andrew's at, my opinion on this frickin' clown, well, folks, let's be real. If he had nothing to hide, he would have come forward. His actions are not the actions of an innocent man. I want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt as much as possible, and I think I'm pretty clear about the tiers of people that we're dealing with here, right? And I reserve my ire and my real rage and anger at these individuals who helped the day-to-day operations of this criminal enterprise take place. Now, don't get me wrong. You know I light these enablers up as well. Evisceration style. But the fact that the federal government has all of this information for decades, and yet we are where we're at, is it's appalling to me. And Andrew is in that other tier, right? He is being incredibly accused of not just being an enabler, which is absolutely horrendous and disgusting, but he is also being accused of partaking in Jeffrey Epstein's criminal enterprise, abusing Virginia Roberts at Jeffrey Epstein's behest. That is what we're talking about when it comes to Prince Andrew. So how can Jeffrey Berman even say, oh, well, you're not a suspect in any case or anything like that. We just want to talk to you as a witness. That's not good enough. And if he's attempting to dog walk Andrew into that and attempting to have his legal team have their guard down, well, he's not doing himself any favors here. Because he's already being called out now. Berman's already being called out now by the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family's legal team saying they got these emails. And the rest of us are sitting here like, could these people be any more devious on both sides? What it does is it really puts on display the absolute garbage job that the prosecution has done in this case from the very beginning. I don't know how much more critical I can be of the SDNY and the way they conducted themselves throughout this whole entire sordid ordeal. You think the SDNY has any problem sending their SWAT team to kick in somebody's door over a few sports bets? Nah, zero problem with that, folks. But when it comes to something like this, when it comes to a who's who of the political class, a who's who of the donor class, and a lot of their friends, well, they can't be bothered, I guess, to make any arrests. They can't be bothered to even drop any indictments on these people to get them in front of a judge and a jury. Instead, they're busy playing games in the media, talking about this, that, or the other thing. Well, I'm here to tell you, SDNY, stop posturing. Stop the BS. You have the goods. There's no chance you do not have the goods at this point. Let's see some indictments. Today's article is from The Spectator, and the headline is, Prince Andrew fires back at the Department of Justice. And the author of this article is Dominic Green. And this article first appeared on June 15th, but you're seeing a lot of talk about it today in the Daily Mail, and Fox is running it as well. But this is the actual source of those articles, so I figured we'd go back to the actual source and see what Dominic Green has to say. Prince Andrew isn't hiding from the Department of Justice, a source close to the prince told me on Friday, and Jeffrey Berman, U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, isn't telling the truth. Well, again, folks, it's not hard, it's not a leap for me to believe that the Department of Justice here and Jeffrey Berman is playing loose with the truth. We've seen it time and time again since Berman and Cy Vance have been over there. We've seen it time and time again. This isn't the sort of operation that went after the mafia with such precision. What they have become is a political body that is more willing to get involved in politics and try and move things, the political needle one way or the other, as opposed to actually pursuing real prosecutions. Instead of them doing their job, right? Instead of them chasing down these co-conspirators and others like them, they're more involved in being part of the resistance or whatever the hell it is they're involved in over there right now. Because I'll tell you what they're not involved in, folks. They're not involved in prosecutorial work at this point, okay? What's going on in this case is a travesty. The time frame that we're operating in here is embarrassing for the Department of Justice and the SDNY. To act like this case just began with Jeffrey Epstein's arrest, his second arrest, is a slap in the face to anybody who's following how things are working in this case, and also really is a slap in the face to the survivors. The FBI has all the evidence they need. The question we should be asking ourselves at this point is, what are they waiting for? Who to believe, the prince or the prosecutor? Andrew has kept his head below the parapet since discussing his connections to Jeffrey Epstein in a disastrous BBC interview last November. But Berman has been a voluble and public presence, 3 times in the last 6 months, Berman has accused Andrew and his lawyers of refusing to cooperate with the Department of Justice request that he make a witness statement. Andrew and his team have said nothing until now. And you see the pushback. The MLA was the straw that broke the camel's back for Andrew and his team, and you see how they're pushing back here. And again, it's like we're the frog and we're dealing with 2 scorpions who want to have a ride across the water here. Well, why'd you sting me, frog? Why'd you sting me, scorpion? Well, Mr. Frog, it's in my nature. And unfortunately, it's in the nature at this point in time of the Department of Justice and Andrew Berman to be deceitful. And it most certainly is in the nature of Andrew, the Prince of Punk Asses, or, as Virginia has labeled him, the Prince of Toads. Well, it's in his nature to be a liar as well. We have seen that from his many years of public service and from the many, many articles we have reported on this podcast and elsewhere. Berman has actively misled the global media and the global audience, my source alleges. The Duke's legal team has dozens of email exchanges with the Southern District proving that there has been full cooperation. Now, again, Dominic Green and his sources are not mentioned here as in who they are. My guess would be it's someone on Andrew's legal team, because I don't think Andrew has any friends really that are that well placed anymore. I guess maybe could it be Fergie who's the source? I doubt it very highly. But for my money, it's definitely one of the members of Andrew's legal team or one of the high-profile PR people that he hired. They've probably reached out to Dominic Green, and this is their counteroffensive. This is them firing back against Berman and his leak of the MLA and his piss-poor job of prosecuting this case. And Berman has no one to blame but himself. He's left himself open to this. Instead of just dropping a vicious RICO case right on top of all of these people's heads, he's messed around. He's dicked around. He's dragged his feet. And he hasn't pursued justice in a manner that it should be pursued in a case such as this. On January 27th, Berman denounced the Duke, a.k.a. the Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, from the steps of Epstein's Manhattan townhouse. Berman claimed to be facing a wall of silence and zero cooperation from Andrew. But this, my source tells me, wasn't true. Berman must have known we had an email trail. That's a significant statement. Berman must know that the emails exist, right? So what it says to me is, in Berman's own way, he is saying that the prince here is not just a witness, but that the prince is also a subject of the investigation. And he doesn't say it in so many words, right? And I'm reading into that, and I'm trying to read in between the lines here. But what else could it mean? Why would Berman be so brazen with his public outcry of Andrew's behavior unless he had the goods on him? Unless, of course, Berman is just an absolutely incredibly inept human being who is terrible at his job and is using that as a cover to protect people within the government still. That could also be an option, right? We have to keep everything on the table here. We can't discount anything right now because, once again, we're dealing with murky water. Hard as it may be to believe, the DOJ made no effort to contact Prince Andrew during Jeffrey Epstein's lifetime. This is a fact, and the Department of Justice should be ashamed of themselves. We're talking about 4 administrations, starting with Clinton, that have went back and have never contacted Jeffrey Epstein, Prince Andrew, about Jeffrey Epstein. Nobody's ever reached out to him from the Department of Justice ever until Jeffrey Epstein's death. Only after Epstein's death in August 2019 and the BBC's broadcast of Virginia Roberts' accusations in November of 2019 did the Department of Justice approach the prince, not as a suspect, but as a witness. It shows you the ineptitude as well, folks. That goes back administrations. This isn't just a Trump thing. Trump is not the main problem here. He's a symptom of the problems, no doubt about it, and he is a disgusting individual who enabled Jeffrey Epstein for years, no doubt about it. You can't refute it. I don't care if you're the most ardent Trump supporter, you cannot refute the fact that Trump played a role in enabling this man. But he is not the only one. And I understand a lot of people are getting fat at the buffet of confirmation bias at this point. And I understand a lot of people are scared to leave their echo chamber. But folks, if you're just joining us here, and this is your first go-round, or you're just getting comfortable at the Jeffrey Epstein podcast, my advice to you is this. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because the things that we are unearthing here on the podcast and elsewhere, and the facts that are being brought to the table, are not comfortable facts. And a lot of people you may hold in high regard, you will find had some part in enabling Jeffrey Epstein throughout this whole entire disgusting ordeal. And I know I've confronted that myself. And I came into this with one way of thinking, and my way of thinking about this case and about how we are governed has completely and utterly been thrown off of its axis. And folks, I don't have a team. I don't have this is my guy. There's no way he could be involved in this. I don't have that anymore. I don't sit at the buffet of confirmation bias when it comes to this case at all anymore. And what we see here is a man, Prince Andrew, aka the Joe Exotic of the royal family, who has an intimate role within what occurred under Jeffrey Epstein's orbit. We have a man who has not been approached by any of the administrations, not Barack Obama's, not George Bush's, and not Donald Trump's, until the issue was forced. You see, the problem is with all of them, not just one side of the aisle, not just the Democrats, not just the Republicans. All of them are complicit in not only this case, but in all of the madness you see around you. The lawyers responded immediately, I'm told. In early January, the Prince's new legal team suggested that they draft a proposal for how Andrew would deliver his witness statement. The DOJ, my source reports, accepted this approach. So why did Berman publicly attack Andrew only a week later? And that's a good question, right? I don't have the answer to that. I don't understand what the strategy is coming out of Berman's office. I don't know what his deal is. I don't know how he's pursuing this case, if he's pursuing it at all. My wish is that this case would be kicked to somebody else, a hard-charging prosecutor that has no problem lifting up rocks and exposing the insects that live underneath. Because the only way we're truly going to get to the bottom of this thing, the only way we're ever going to be able to shine light within this dark room, is if we have prosecutors and judges that are willing to do their job, not play politics from the bench, not play politics from the prosecutor's office, but do their job. Equal justice under the law. Is that too much of a demand to make? Is that too much of a request to make from the government? Since Epstein's death, commercial law firms and the Department of Justice have targeted the prince, even though the facts about Epstein haven't changed, my source explains. Well, no, that might be the case, but the facts, while they might not have changed, there are more people looking at the facts now, and the outcry is growing because at the end of the day, what occurred under that first plea deal is beyond unconscionable, and it is unacceptable, and none of us should accept that somebody like Krista Marks is going to keep those documents closed. We should not accept that, because there is a lot of evidence that pins Andrew as more than a witness here. And his law firm, of course, is going to try and make it out like it's just the Department of Justice who is going batshit crazy here, who doesn't know what they're doing here, who is lying here. But in reality, we all know that it's both sides that are playing loose with the truth. The DOJ is a water carrier for the commercial law firms who are representing the undoubtedly legitimate claims of Epstein survivors. The Duke is being used as a lightning conductor for the Department of Justice and a battering ram for the law firms who want to secure settlements from Epstein's estate. Oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. They don't need to go after the Duke. That is already established. That estate and that payout for foundation, that fund, is already established. Andrew has nothing to do with that. The reason people are going after Andrew is because this man has been put at the scene of the crime by numerous witnesses, and never mind the powerful testimony of Virginia herself. That's what sealed the deal for me. Listening to her, listening to what she had to say about this, and reading just exactly what these people were involved in. Although the Department of Justice wanted to talk with Andrew as a witness, Berman seemed to imply that Andrew had aided Epstein's crimes. Epstein couldn't have done what he did without the assistance of others. This, I'm told, was an overt breach of the Department of Justice's own rules on how to engage with witnesses and the need to maintain privacy and confidentiality. Again, it's all about technicalities with these people. It's all about, oh, well, you didn't follow the proper instructions, or you didn't follow all these little steps. It's never about the fact that the guy is obviously guilty. They don't ever say, oh, well, he's innocent, he didn't do any of this, and he wants to get on the record and prove that. No, that never occurs, because that's not what he's trying to do here. That's not what they want him to do. They want him to keep his mouth shut, and they hope that this will all pass by. They hope that what has occurred for the past 10 years, 15 years, will continue into the future. But I'm here to tell you that that is not the case. We will not be shook off of the trail, and we will not stop until justice is served. And for me, that is a trial. And once he's at trial, well, that'll be for the courts to decide. But this man needs to sit down with an investigator. He needs to answer questions under oath, and it needs to occur soon. After Berman's attack in January, there was a very frank exchange of views between Andrew's lawyers and the Southern District. But Andrew's team played by the rules and didn't release emails that would prove that they were negotiating with the Southern District in good faith. Well, that could be a problem for Berman. If they have those emails, it could definitely change the narrative a little bit and make it look like the Department of Justice is being underhanded with Andrew. But at the same time, I have to believe that, as inept as I think Berman is, that the office would be able to cover their ass in a situation like this. Berman's response was to launch a second public salvo. On March 9th, he accused Andrew of having completely shut the door on voluntary cooperation. As Camilla Tominey of the London Telegraph noticed, Berman had contradicted his previous statement. If Andrew's team were putting up a wall of silence, how could Berman know Andrew had shut the door on him? Later in March, the U.S. Attorney's Office admitted that there had in fact been communications through the prince's attorneys, but we have been informed that he is not willing to submit to an interview. Well, look, again, it comes down to who do you believe more? And obviously, there's probably a sprinkle of truth in both stories. But the fact remains. Don't get caught up in the minutia of this BS. Don't get caught up in the process. The fact remains that Andrew is being credibly accused by Virginia Roberts, and until he answers for that, all the rest of this shit is BS. Technicalities, loopholes, they're not operating with a straight bat. Shut up. Did you or did you not do what Virginia is accusing you of? Under oath, that needs to be answered. The problem, I'm told, wasn't Andrew's willingness so much as a collapse of trust. Berman's grandstanding chilled relations between the Department of Justice and Prince Andrew's lawyers to somewhere between a Cold War and a Mexican standoff. Okay, that's all fine and well, but what about before Berman came out and said these things? Was Andrew clamoring to go have a talk with the investigators then, or was he playing more of his bullshit games? You know what he was doing. The man was playing games, he was ducking and dodging, and to be honest with you folks, I'm getting really tired of these people and their technicalities. That is their Hail Mary, their safeguard. Well, I know I'm guilty, but how about we use some of these processes and these loopholes to make sure that I'm afforded different protections in the court than other people's would be, because I can afford to pay you $2,000 an hour and all that comes with that. In early June, the Department of Justice issued a mutual legal assistance treaty request to the British Home Office, a formal request for Prince Andrew's response. Berman went back on the offensive, possibly breaching the DOJ's rules for a third time by implying that Andrew was evading his inquiries. Our doors remain open, and we await word on when we can expect him. Well, Berman, while you're waiting for Andrew, it's all nice and well, that's great. How about you make some other arrests, here in the United States? Why don't you go after some of the co-conspirators and the core four while we're waiting on this situation with Andrew to pan out? Don't you think that if you brought some of them in, that maybe the pressure would be put on Andrew and Ghislaine and they might make some mistakes? Isn't that how you operate when you're dealing with criminal organizations? Why are you not operating in the same manner right now? That confidential MLAT request somehow found its way into the British press and forced Andrew's team to make a statement. The MLAT leak was a further perversion of the narrative and the legal process, my source tells me. Again, technicalities. A perversion of the narrative? No, here's the problem. You're not in control of the narrative right now. So that's the big problem. So what you're going to do is you're going to wage this PR war in hopes that you regain the high ground, in hopes that you regain the narrative by painting Berman as the only sinister jerk-off in the whole entire conversation. Well, I have news for you, pal. We know that there are multiple jerk-offs in this situation. Berman has done everything he can to publicly destroy our trust and to lie. The Duke's team suspect that Berman is playing to the gallery of the American media as his predecessor at the Southern District, Rudy Giuliani, did before him. We're acutely conscious Berman may think it is in his interest to keep us in this standoff. The difference between Giuliani, I don't care what you think about him now, I'm talking about when he was a prosecutor in New York. The difference is he wasn't just firing off these platitudes. He wasn't just giving empty threats. Giuliani might have been grandstanding, but he was prosecuting at the same time and crushing people with RICO. Prince Andrew did his cause no favors with the BBC interview. He looked shifty under aggressive questioning, more like a defendant than a witness. I found him unconvincing. His responses raised as many questions as they answered. He was, I now hear, either badly advised or he didn't listen to advice. That was Amanda Thrask who really wanted him to do this, right? And I heard Fergie wanted him to do this as well. But anybody who's ever had a conversation with the guy should have known better. The Joe Exotic of the Windsor family isn't quite the wordsmith. The prince was quite simply an easy target, his friend tells me. Andrew was the least protected of all the individuals who knew Jeffrey Epstein, a lot less protected than Donald Trump or Bill Clinton or Ghislaine Maxwell, who has simply disappeared. Oh, a lot less protected, huh? Please, stop it right now. Andrew is so protected, it's not even funny. Not only protected by the crown, but he's being protected by the British authorities, as well as whatever stupid-ass spy agencies were involved. And if you think the MI6 isn't involved in protecting him, you are being very naive. Andrew was a sitting duck, and he wasn't well prepared by the team over at Buckingham Palace. That's not a criticism of the palace. It's the way the palace has to operate over decades and centuries, not days and weeks. They simply don't have the freedom of maneuver to afford Andrew the legal and media protection he needs and deserves. Oh, that's such BS. They could do whatever they want. She's the queen. She could do whatever she wants. If she wants to spend $1 billion protecting Andrew and she has those assets, that's her business. I don't want to hear that, they have to worry about centuries in the future. If that was the case, the queen would have jettisoned him. But she has not. She has protected him. The BBC broadcast led to Andrew's withdrawal from public life and the engagement of a new team of lawyers and advisors. My source insists that the prince still wants to thaw the frozen process of negotiations. Again, what we have here is his legal team stepping in and saying, oh, the prince wants to thaw the process, but the legal team saying, no, this is being rough, right? Good cop, bad cop. It's Prince Andrew's clear instruction that the working group he formed in January should facilitate a grown-up interaction with the DOJ. He feels it is his duty to cooperate. His view is that all this is a further distraction from the genuine need for justice for Epstein's survivors. The form of witness statement could range from a written statement to an agreed Q&A, but not without the DOJ building trust and fast. If they don't, then we know they're not serious about talking to Prince Andrew and that this is indeed a circus. That makes me so mad to read that. All of a sudden, Andrew he cares about the survivors. He doesn't give a shit about the survivors. How dare he? How dare he say that after what he's being accused of by Virginia? What, Virginia doesn't matter? What Virginia says doesn't matter? Please, let me tell you what, Joe Exotic of the Windsor family, you can wrangle and wangle and dangle all you want and use whatever loopholes you think you're going to use, but at the end of the day, the fact remains. Hard questions are going to be asked, and hard answers from you are demanded. Nick Baez, a spokesperson for the Southern District of New York, declined to comment. Perhaps it's time for Jeffrey Berman to deliver another of his signature public statements. So, look, there is a lot to unpack here. There is a lot going on behind the scenes that we aren't privy to. There is a battle raging between the Department of Justice and Prince Andrew's people, and we're left here in the middle and on the outside looking in with questions. And those questions are, which one of these liars should we believe more? If you'd like to contact me, you could do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. And for those of you who donated to the GoFundMe today, thank you very much. All right, everybody, we will be back tomorrow, and we will do it all over again.